Chapter 2 really sees our first, discernible interactions with C++. Here in Chapter 2, even though we do pick up again a little bit of the ideas of Y program, even though that's still Chapter 1 behind me, even though we see some of the parts of the program again, right? Where we talk again about include and what that does and why we require it for our programs. We talk a little bit about using namespace because otherwise we would have to forever be damned to do std : cout every time we want to do a cout. And then we would still forever be damned to say std : cin every time we want to cin. And our variable structures would be different as well. And nobody enjoys that interaction. Here in Chapter 2, we get to see the cin object and the cout object. Remember, the cout makes it so that we can communicate from the software to the user, and the cin object allows the user to communicate their needs to the software. So by now, I think, living in Chapter 4, that has become reflex for all of you as developers, is to work with the cout object, to work with the cin object, and be able to actually make that interaction happen there. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, fantastic. Here, we also really take a dive and look at all of our data types. Remember, we are using, through most of this class, we are using the cardinal data types, the ones that either by just its normal inclusion or with the inclusion of the string library really are part and parcel of C++ in general. So we talked about our numeric data types, integer data types, whole numbers, floating data types, real numbers. So ones with decimal values, double data types, larger floating point numbers. We also talked about the Boolean data type, where they are either true or false, but not both. We talked about the character data type, a data type that can stand for one and only one character at a time. Looking at some of your Chapter 4 stuff, I know that being restricted to one character only still gets some of you sometimes. And remember that those characters, lowercase a through lowercase z, uppercase a through uppercase z, the numbers 0 through 9, and then the special characters. Remember that all of those are mapped to a numeric value so that we can say greater than or less than. Is lowercase b greater than or equal to lowercase a? That's something we can do because the system, because C++ understands it can be both. A character can be both a character that's represented alphabetically to a user and something that can be represented to the system numerically so that we can do testing with it. So that is all of our cardinal data types. We are also working with strings. Remember, strings are just a collection of characters that belong together and always belong together after you instantiate them. Remember also that you do have to use an include so that you can bring the string library along with it. Just a breadcrumb here. Now, this does not have an impact for the midterm. This does not have an impact necessarily on anything that we have done previously, but it will have an impact again on things you do in the future. Here in Chapter 2, just as a review, there is a list of functions that belong to the string library. We've actually seen a couple of these in our code samples that accompany all of our material here. So things like length, how long is a string? Those things are listed there, just so you remember that they're there for when you need them. We also talked about arithmetic operators. So what can we do mathematically? Because remember again, the thing that C++ likes doing the most is math. So plus, minus, multiply, divide, equals, those here are still important as well. And very, very finally, we also had the idea of named constants, things that we need to use inside of our program that should not have their value changed, but that we'd like to refer to, periodically or frequently. So think about things like pi. That's not something that we want to change the value of ever. So pi would be a good example of a named constant. Taxes, tax rate rather, would be a good named constant because that's not a value that we would want people to change. Like, it's not a fantastic idea to ask the user, what would you like to pay in, sales tax or whatever. That's something we would like to have hard coded and something that we do not want to be able to change. So chapter 2, we start to see real code. We start to interact with the system, and the system can interact with us via CIN and Cout. We can use data types, we can use variables in order to communicate and store those values someplace. That happens here in chapter 2.